Veterans Day, 2009, by Jeffrey Bingham Mead was published in HawaiiReporter.com, Malia Zimmerman, publisher. It was my 13th birthday, and my father came to my room that day with a unique gift. I did not realize it until much later that a responsibility had been handed to me that early spring day. I was receiving a piece of history that was rare and compelling. I was sitting in my room in our house in the Round Hill section of Greenwich when Dad strode in with a Japanese samurai sword he brought back from China, a symbol of his service in the Marine Corps during and after World War II. "This is yours now," I recall him saying, as he presented it to me. He told me a few stories about being stationed in northeastern China, specifically Beijing and Tianjin with the 1st Marine Division. We gazed together at photo albums and books, and were transported to a time and place far, far away. And yet for this veteran and member of America's greatest generation, it was so near. The sword came to his possession, he told me, at the surrender of Imperial Japanese forces on VJ Day, which he attended on the railroad platform at Beijing's train station. At the prearranged signal, the Japanese soldiers reportedly piled their swords on the platform, and upon completion the American and Allied soldiers walked over to retrieve them. The U.S. Marines are no strangers to China and Japan, landing in both places more than 150 years ago, including with Commodore Perry in 1853. The original China Marines came from the 4th Marine Regiment stationed in Shanghai, 1927 to 1941. My dad, the China Marine, sounded great to me. Last summer I flew home to Connecticut to attend my nephew godson's wedding. Much time and circumstance had passed between those private moments on my 13th birthday. We had all grown older, and the family was more globally distributed than ever before. We were together again. Dad was now 84 years young, and though not in youthful vigor, was yet still much the Marine he was in China. At the time he was living in an assisted living home, and one day, with children and grandchildren around him, he started reminiscing about those days in China, where he often seemed happiest. In his closet were 2 photo albums with newspaper clippings and mostly old black and white photos of various places in China. On one of the pages was a clipping of a news story dated October 25th, 1945, from our hometown newspaper. It spoke of a much darker and dangerous time. In a letter home, he wrote, "I am very thankful that you did not know what I was doing when we were fighting on Okinawa. When I was transferred from the 3rd Amphibious Corps to the 1st Marine Division, I was changed from radar to radio, and I am still in radio. I carried a portable radio on my back in combat. During the operations, I was with the 5th Marines, which is an infantry outfit, as a forward observer for the 11th Marines Artillery. I was on the front lines from April 8th until the fighting ended. The first month we were working with different Army outfits. Boy, I was never so scared in all my life. On an OP team, there are 1 officer, 2 radio men, 1 scout sergeant, and 3 wiremen. Each battery sends out 2 teams. Of all our men who were up on the line, 50% were killed or wounded, so I guess I was lucky, for I had many a close call." Dad talked to us for the first time about surviving the front lines of the Battle of Okinawa. It was the largest amphibious assault in the Pacific region during the war. The battle lasted 82 days, and more died there than in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined. Okinawa is an island just shy of 10 times the size of our hometown. 1/4 of the civilian population was killed in the carnage, with over 100,000 Japanese soldiers and the Allies suffering 50,000. Military historians have told me that it was a miracle that Dad and others like him on both sides survived. "You never knew when you were drawing your last breath," PFC Eugene Sledge, USMC 1st Marine Division Okinawa, is quoted as saying. "You lived in total uncertainty, on the brink of the abyss, day after day. The only thing that kept you going was you just felt you had to live up to the demands of your buddies who were depending on it." To this day, Dad sometimes awakens from bad dreams of those horrific days and nights on the field of battle. "Last September I was home, and Dad was ill. We thought it was the end. On my way to the hospital, I had a chance encounter with renowned historian David McCulloch, who was in town with his family to attend the funeral of a mutual friend. Your father is a genuine hero to have survived Okinawa, and for me it was an emotional and transcendental moment I pray I never forget. And I must conclude that it was God's intervening grace that bounced my father, the China Marine, back for a while longer. I'm truly grateful." A few years ago, when PBS affiliates around the U.S. broadcast Ken Burns' The War, My father and I would simultaneously speak by phone, me in Hawaii and Dad in Connecticut, at which time he reminisced about combat at Guadalcanal. See those guys in the jungle? I was there. Peleliu and other places in the far reaches of the South Pacific and up to Okinawa. On Peleliu alone, more than 12,000 American and Japanese soldiers perished in the span of a few months. It was humbling news, and I humbly listened to the words from one who was there to witness it all and survive. While Dad was in China, the Marine Corps marked its 170th birthday. The Continental Congress in Philadelphia passed a resolution creating the Marine Corps on November 10, 1775. The first recruiting office, reported the Honolulu Advertiser, was in Tun Tavern. Its proprietor was a big-fisted fellow named Robert Mullen. The first commandant was Captain Samuel Nicholas, who instructed Mullen to accept only those who were, quote, of dependable and religious nature combined with proper robustness of body, unquote. An editorial saluting the Marines asked, were American schoolboys, carpenters, soda jerks, lawyers, doctors, and such people strong enough and wise enough to hack their way through a crawling jungle, into swamps and over mountains, and come out on top? The same editorial answered, the fellow picked to find out if we were to live or die was the Marine, who on his 170th birthday today is not, based on reports from North China, yet done with war. The August 1848 edition of Honolulu's monthly news, The Friend, stated that, quote, our life, it is true, has its bright and dark moments, yet none are wholly obscured, for when the sun of happiness is set, the reflected moonlight of hope and memory are still with us. My father loved China, and still does. Even confessed to me that leaving was very difficult. The French threw the best parties, and some parts of Beijing were considered then so dangerous that some who ventured there were not seen again. He told me that with so many Japanese soldiers and dependents around, they were conscripted to direct traffic. Throw in the presence of bandits, Kuomintang, and communist armies, and you have a powder keg ready to blow. One of Dad's favorite memories revolves around the Temple of Heaven in Beijing's Chongwen district. Constructed in the 15th century, the temple complex covers an area 5 times the size of the Forbidden City. One of its remarkable features is the echo wall that surrounds the imperial vault of heaven. At more than 200 feet in diameter, a person facing the wall while whispering could be heard clearly 100 feet or so away. As he smiled, he reflected on what a novelty it was to him and his fellow Marines. The Summer Palace, the Gardens of Nurtured Harmony, consists of palaces, gardens, Longevity Hill, and the famous or infamous marble boat on Kunming Lake. Its breathtaking beauty captivated my father and his fellow Marines. We gazed at pictures taken from atop the Dowager Empress's marble boat of places called Temple of the Clouds, of pagodas, the Jade Fountain Park. It was the adventure of a lifetime for Dad. He made me promise to return there before he died to see it all again, to savor its aromas and flavors, and re-establish a connection that was never severed in his heart. And, of course, take lots of pictures. The phone would ring in late January, early February with the question, do you know what today is? Chinese New Year. It sure was. He shared pictures of Chinese boys walking on stilts in the streets of Tianjin. One of my favorite photos is of a Chinese wedding coach drawn by horses. Yes, even in the midst of destruction and recovery, it was reassuring to know that at least one betrothed couple took stock in the situation and erred on the side of brighter days ahead. Today is Veterans Day. One calls to mind the men and women who survived danger, separation, and endured sacrifice in behalf of us all. They walk among us daily. They do not deserve to be forgotten or cast aside, nor should their stories and reminiscences be tossed into oblivion. We need their stories more than ever, and we all have a duty to preserve them for posterity. The courage and patience veterans exemplify is a special willpower that, like the peace they sacrificed for, is difficult to encapsulate. Dad delights in the knowledge that I teach part-time at a small Japan-based international college in Hawaii. Quote, keep them safe and well. I hope they never go through what I and their grandparents did, unquote, he once said. Count on it.